Welcome to, I believe, part 7 of our lecture on axial skeleton. I lost track after 5 because I ran out of fingers. So, we were talking about the different vertebrae and how to identify them. Now, this is a typical cervical vertebrae. It has these transverse foramen and very small transverse processes. It has a short spinous process that's actually bifidal, 2 parts of it. And it's not very long either. And then it has relatively flat superior articulating facets. Now, we also have 2 special ones. We have the atlas. The atlas is lacking a body because the axis right here stole it. It's the dens right there. And this makes a pivot joint, so you could say, no more parts. I promise there's only 12 more. So, those are the 2 special cervical vertebrae. That's why they get names. So on the test, I'm going to give you these characteristics and you're going to have to tell me what kind of vertebrae it is. So again, we talked about Atlas, the titan who holds up the sky. It has very deep, flat, superior articulating facets. So here you can see they're very large, they're very deep. And that's because it's articulating with the occipital condyles of the occipital bone. A lot of students get that wrong on the test. I'd say about a third of the class. The atlas articulates with the occipital bone at its condyles. Now it lacks a body because the dens, right here, would have been the body of it. So the axis steals the body. It has 2 bodies, I guess. And that's going to form this special pivot joint that lets you shake your head no. The atlas also really lacks a posterior spinous process. It has a protuberance right there, but it's technically called a posterior cervical, but it's not really a true process, unlike all the rest that have a nice pointy spinous process. And that's because no muscle attaches there. The spinous process of all the rest, we have muscle attachment. Axis. So see, the axis has this nice, beautiful dens. These superior facets tend to be slanted somewhat. And that's because it is actually going to form a joint where you could say no with the atlas, which is right here. And this facets actually covering over the transverse processes. So if I look here, I have to actually look very carefully. There's the transverse facet right there. So that is atlas, axis, and the other 7 cervical vertebrae. And again, this is a very important joint. It lets you shake your head, no, I've had enough. We are moving on to the thoracic vertebrae. There's 12 of them. They are called T1 through T12. They are not named after the 12 Olympic gods. I think there are 25 Olympic gods, by the way, not just 12. And each thoracic vertebrae is going to articulate with a pair of ribs. So there's 24 ribs or 12 pairs of ribs, and they each articulate with a thoracic vertebrae. That means a thoracic vertebrae has to have special structures to articulate with said ribs or said vertebrae. So, if we actually were to look at this, we should see there's an indentation here called a facet. That's called a transverse facet. And the cervical of the rib is going to go there. Then there's a little indentation right here called a demifacet. It's half of a facet. And the head of the rib is going to articulate there. Let me try to find one of these models that has a little bit better one. So this vertebrae right here has a much nicer transverse facet, and a structure on the rib that is right there called the cervical is actually going to articulate with it like so. So, and then the head of the rib is going to articulate with the body, and the ribs actually are going to rotate up and down. Trying another view, so there is the transverse facet. This is a demifacet, that's a demifacet. The cervical of the rib, which is right there, is going to be attached to this facet, and I so need a third hand, like so. And of course my thumb is in the way. So it goes like that. The head articulates to the body, and it lifts up and down. So I hope you could see that. That was a very awkward view there. So the bodies of these look like hearts. I guess it looks like a heart. And it's going to have a very, very steep transverse or spinous process. So see how steep this is going down. So that's the horizontal plane. It's very, very steep going down. And it has these two cute little demifacets on the body. And this is where the head articulates with. And then it has a transverse facet on the transverse process. Transverse facet, transverse process. And that is where the tubercle of the rib attaches. So it is modified for rib attachment. And my students say this looks like a giraffe. Here are the ears, here's the head, that's the eye. It does not look like a giraffe. Yes, it looks like a giraffe, fine. So, the spinous process, not only does it angle down, it's very large. It has a lot of muscle that attach with it. And that is pretty much our thoracic vertebrae. So, in case you didn't get that, I think rib attachment's important. Rib attachment's important. So the demifacet's right there. This structure right here is the head of the rib. So the head of the rib is going to be there, and it's called a demifacet because it's partially in that one and partially in the one of the vertebrae above it. So that's why they're called demifacets. Then the tubercle of the rib is attached right there on the transverse facet. And this is going to form something called a planar joint. It allows the ribs to go up and down as you're breathing. So your homework, find a steep hill, run a mile uphill both ways in the snow, and see how much your rib cage is going up and down. So you already know that's going to happen, fine. That rib cage moving up and down is allowed because of these demifacets and these transverse facets. So our lumbar vertebrae, hold on, I'm going to take a nap. Okay. All better. I'm ready to talk about the lumbar vertebrae. As you can tell, I think they're very boring. They're actually very important. They are holding up the weight of your whole trunk. And as a result, they are big, stocky vertebrae. Thoracic, heart shape, medium-sized body. Here is our cervical with a little tiny itty-bitty body. Look how big that body is. And it doesn't have as many muscles attaching to it, so it's going to have short transverse processes. It's going to have a short spinous process. And its job is to be big and to hold weight. So it doesn't have any special foramen. So here's the transverse foramen of a cervical. Here's a transverse facet of a thoracic. So it doesn't have anything special on it. I'm sorry, lumbar, you're boring. You're vanilla. Oh well. So you have 5 of them. It is very stocky. So short, transverse, short spinous processes. And the articulating facets actually go sort of inwards on them. And it lacks any special features. I'm sorry, you're not that exciting. So this is a sacrum right here. This is the anterior surface, and this is the posterior surface. This is superior, and then down here is inferior. The first thing you notice are these remains of the spinous processes, and that is called the sacral crest. The crest is just a ridge, so this is the sacral crest, and that's the remains of the spinous processes. Now, there are these foramen. These are posterior foramen because they're on the back side, and we have anterior foramen on the anterior side. And the spinal cord actually goes down the spinal canal. This really should not be solid. This is a model. It's made from a solid chunk of plastic. And we can also see from this view, there are articulating facets for the last lumbar vertebrae. Now, I'm going to hold it up. Do not laugh at my basement, how it needs to be painted. The top here is said to be ala. So these are the ala, and that means wings. So it looks like it has wings. I guess it has wings. Now, if I turn it sideways to this view, this is the auricular surface, What part of your head does that look like? Not a bone, just something you see every day. It actually looks like an ear. So this is the auricular surface. An auricle is an ear. So they call this auricular surface because it looks like an ear. Fun fact, it's going to articulate with this auricular surface of the ilium. So we have 2 ears in our skeletal system. Makes perfect sense. So the sacrum, it started out life as 5 vertebrae. You do need to know it. Sometimes I test you on it. I will not test you that it allegedly fuses in your 30s. The ala are the wings. So up here, these are the ala. And ala is plural, alae is singular. And the auricular surface would be on this side. It really is auricular, not articular. It's going to form a joint, a sliding joint with the ilium. And it's actually going to bind with another auricular surface. The sacral crest, I like the sacral crest very much. That's the sacral crest. It's the remnants of the spinous process. I guess that's the remnants of the transverse processes. And the holes are the sacral foramina. Foramina is plural, foramen is singular. We have anterior on the front. We have posterior on the back. So I like the sacrum. It's a very underappreciated set fused bone. Okay, something very exciting for you. We've never opened this coccyx for this model set. We have an unboxing. Is that what it's called? So, and here is our coccyx vertebrae. Very anticlimactic. I don't understand these unboxing videos at all. So this is CO1, and it still has its remnants of its transverse processes. We have the rest of them, CO2, 3, and 4. I'm sorry you don't have a 5. I'm sure if I look for it, I can find it. And we're going to have one set of nerves called first coccygeal nerve sneaking out here. And there is no vertebral foramen for the coccyx. The spine, the nerves, the last one comes out there. Oops, the last one comes out where 28 is. There we go. And the coccyx is actually important. Some muscles attached to it. They've actually removed the coccyx, and people actually have trouble with those muscles in the pelvis. So yeah, we actually, even though people say it's vestigial, we actually need our tailbone. So your coccyx is 3 to 5 vertebrae that fuse in your 30s. And they get smaller and smaller. Only CO1 has its transverse process. And what I didn't like about those models is you actually have a remnant of a spinous process right there. That's where the muscles are attaching, but that model didn't have it. Oh well. And it is needed for some muscle attachment. So, intervertebral discs. It's made out of fibrocartilage. So this is the intervertebral foramen. And we have this fibrocartilage. It's a shock absorber. It is holding weight and it's compressing. So it's going to absorb shock as you do jumping jacks, or you jump off of perfectly good 10-foot high brick walls and break your leg. That is a true story from one of my students, by the way. So it holds the vertebrae together. It forms something called a symphysis joint, which is fibrocartilage. And you have it between all of them. The inner part right here is actually not fibrocartilage. It's a gel. And what happens is this gel sort of dissolves and the disc loses its shape, and you can actually compress this foramen, and what happens is you smash the poor little spinal nerve, and it's normally in the lumbar region. So on the test, you need to tell me what is special about all these vertebrae. So between now and the next video, think about what is special. You even have to say something special about the lumbar vertebrae. We can't forget it. And thank you for listening.